A thin veil of dawn light filtered through the small lattice window of the stone chamber, spilling jagged beams that fractured across the rough-hewn floor. Dust motes floated in the still, chill air like fragments of forgotten stars, each one suspended in the hush that had claimed the room long before her arrival. The faint scent of beeswax lingered stubbornly, mingling with the damp wool that clung to the walls and the shadows in the corners, a smell as old as the keep itself. Floorboards groaned under the careful steps of a woman moving with deliberate precision between bundles of folded linen, their folds heavy with the memories of countless hands who had touched them before. Each footfall was a careful negotiation with time and space, each breath a silent rhythm in the cathedral of solitude that this chamber had become. She paused beside a carved wooden chest, brushing her fingers lightly across its worn surface, feeling the subtle curves and grooves polished smooth by decades of touch. The chest was older than she was, older than anyone who currently walked the halls. It held letters, tokens, scraps of memory folded and pressed into its depths, never meant to be read aloud, never meant to escape. It was a silent keeper of lives lived in whispers, of loves left unspoken, of thoughts and dreams imprisoned behind iron and oak. Outside, the distant clang of the bell tower rolled across the courtyard, each strike insistent and sonorous, marking the arrival of another day within the Lord's keep. Yet within these walls, time moved differently, measured by the rhythm of her breath, the flicker of shadows, the slow, stubborn crackle of the hearth. The flame in the fireplace licked the cold stone floor, offering warmth that seemed almost sacred in contrast to the chill pressing against the walls. Her face, half hidden beneath a simple coif, betrayed both endurance and longing, the quiet strength of one accustomed to living in observation rather than participation. There was resilience in her eyes, yet beneath it, a yearning that belonged neither to the past nor to the duties of the day, a flicker of desire for a world outside these confines, a life unbounded by expectation. The lattice window framed the courtyard beyond, yet the view offered only fragments. The black shapes of men moving across cobblestones, the hint of smoke curling from chimneys, the flutter of a bird caught in the cage of early light. In the adjoining kitchen, the scent of simmering pottage drifted on the air, mingling with the earthy aroma of roasted vegetables and stale bread. The aroma was familiar, a tether to the life of the keep, a reminder of tasks that demanded attention. Meals for men whose names she scarcely knew, chores that would be repeated day after day, the quiet obligation of service that had been assigned at birth. Yet the kitchen was also alive with its own rhythms. The hiss of boiling liquid, the scrape of ladles against iron pots, the occasional thump of a rolling pin, all weaving a subtle tapestry of life within the stone walls. She moved toward it slowly, her fingers still brushing the carved chest, and let the smell guide her, comforting and constraining at once. She could almost feel the presence of those who had come before her, the echoes of hands preparing the same meals, folding the same linens, the same rhythm repeated across centuries. Her hand lingered on the chest, pressing against the iron latch. It was cold, a tactile reminder of both constraint and continuity. The weight of the metal pressed lightly against her palm, a sensation that felt heavier than its mass suggested. It was not merely a chest. It was a repository of memory, a guardian of the secrets that had shaped lives far beyond her own. She traced the edges of the iron with careful fingers, imagining the lives that had unfolded in correspondence kept inside. Letters from fathers and brothers, scraps of prayers, poems never spoken aloud, and confessions penned in ink that had faded but never disappeared. Each letter was a pulse in the continuum of human experience, a heartbeat captured on parchment. She imagined the hands that had written them, imagining the quiet moments of longing, grief, and defiance that had guided the pen. Each word, Each fold, each crease was a trace of humanity pressed into the chest, a testament to lives that demanded remembrance. A small bird tapped lightly at the window pane, its wings casting fleeting shadows in the fragile dawn. It was a creature unbound, its tiny heart beating with freedom she could scarcely conceive. She studied it with a mix of envy and reverence. Its feathers shimmered in the muted light, delicate yet untouchable, as she imagined the wind lifting it, carrying it far beyond stone walls, beyond iron gates, beyond the chest of memories she guarded. The bird's persistence pressed upon her the ache of confinement, the silent insistence that the world extended beyond her line of sight. She allowed herself a slow exhale, a whisper of defiance she alone would hear, a small claim to autonomy in a day dictated by others. The bell tolled again, low and resonant, as if to punctuate her thought. Its vibration traveled through stone and mortar, reaching deep into the chest of her chest, stirring the echo of possibilities she had long denied herself. The dawn deepened, and she allowed her gaze to wander across the chamber. Shadows pooled in corners, draped themselves over bundles of linen, gathered around the base of the chest like watchful sentinels. Each shadow was a story, a fragment of history, a silent observer of her quiet rebellion. Her eyes traced the carvings in the wooden chest, imagining the hands that had etched them, the thoughts that had guided the chisel. Symbols of protection, luck, love, and warning, each line a message from the past, each groove a verse of a poem never fully completed. She lifted a letter from the chest, its edges frayed and softened by time. She held it close, feeling the texture of the parchment, smelling the faint ink that had not yet surrendered to age. The words inside were fragile yet insistent. Confessions of longing, stories of survival, defiance hidden beneath the outward obedience expected of those who served, lived, and loved in shadows. Her mind wandered, unspooling the threads of these lives. She imagined the fear that must have accompanied each folded confession, the hunger for recognition, the secret rebellions, the silent prayers whispered in the night. Each letter was a life, a pulse, a fragment of courage pressed into paper. And yet, the chamber itself bore witness to her own existence, echoing with the quiet defiance of a woman bound by stone and duty, yet yearning for more. The hearth crackled gently, as she traced its warmth along her cheek, letting it anchor her, offering a small comfort in the cold austerity of her surroundings. In the light of the fire, the dust motes shimmered once more, dancing like ghosts of the past, reminders that all lives leave traces, and that memory itself is a form of resistance against oblivion. The bell rang again, and she allowed herself a smile, faint and secretive, as though acknowledging an unseen companion. Its toll seemed to synchronize with her heartbeat, with the rustle of linen, with the faint hiss of the kitchen hearth. Outside, the keep awoke fully, men moving through the courtyard with armor clanking, horses stamping, orders shouted across cobblestones. She remained within, yet she felt the pulse of life beyond the walls, distant but insistent, reminding her that her own story, though constrained, was part of something larger, something alive. Her hands lingered once more on the chest. She opened it slightly, revealing a stack of letters folded with care, each one a promise of understanding, a fragment of rebellion, a testament to love, grief, and endurance. Her fingertips brushed them lightly, feeling the grooves of their folds and the faint stiffness of parchment long kept in shadow. She imagined them carried into the world, read by hands that might understand the longing, the defiance, the quiet courage etched in each stroke. In the adjoining kitchen, the scent of pottage grew stronger, curling around her in waves. She inhaled it deeply, letting it anchor her in the present, and yet she carried the past and the imagined future with equal weight. Each meal prepared, Each order followed. Each duty performed was both a tether and a thread, weaving her life into the larger tapestry of the keep. And yet, her thoughts drifted outward, to the lattice window, to the bird tapping against glass, to the sky stretching pale and unclaimed beyond the stone. She imagined herself stepping beyond the hearth, beyond the chest, beyond the duties that defined her, moving into a world vast, untamed, and unfamiliar. The wind stirred, pressing itself against the walls, lifting the edges of her coif, brushing her cheek, as though urging her toward that unseen horizon. She traced the iron latch one final time, feeling the cold bite lightly against her skin, and allowed herself to imagine the chest empty, its letters freed into the hands of those who would understand. The chest remained closed, but her mind wandered far beyond it, envisioning stories unfolding in light and shadow, love and loss playing out beyond the reach of stone walls. The flame of the hearth cast its warmth, gentle and insistent, across the room. She straightened her back, allowing the fire to fill her chest with courage. Shadows pooled, danced, and receded as the day began, and yet within the stillness of the chamber, she felt a pulse, a quiet insistence of life, defiance, and possibility. The letters, the dust, the warmth, and the bird tapping at the window became threads connecting her to the world beyond the keep, threads she could grasp even if she could not yet release them fully. She stepped toward the kitchen at last, the scent of pottage enveloping her, the soft warmth brushing her hands and face. Every movement was deliberate, each breath measured, as though the day ahead demanded her full presence. Yet she carried with her the secret pulse of rebellion, the quiet defiance that had become her own. The bell tolled once more, a deep, resonant chord that rolled over stone, echoing through corridors and chambers, touching the chest, the hearth, and the woman who moved within this sanctuary. The dawn stretched pale and fragile across the horizon, yet she carried in her chest the pulse of histories, the weight of letters, the rhythm of longing, courage, and quiet hope. Outside, the world moved in its relentless, ordered way. Within, she had claimed her space, her defiance, and her imagination. And in that, the day had begun not just with duty, but with possibility. In the dim light of the castle's eastern wing, a girl kneels beside the washing basin, her fingers stiff and crimson from the icy water that bites at her skin. Each motion is meticulous, almost ceremonial. The rubbing of linen against stone, the folding of sodden wool, the careful wringing of garments until water drips in small, glistening beads onto the cold floor. Frost clings stubbornly to the narrow window panes, spreading delicate patterns like veins of ice, fragile yet unyielding, echoing the quiet fragility of her own existence. She hums a chant, low and trembling, a melody passed from mother to daughter through years of hushed evenings and whispered prayers. Words of protection and perseverance, of the small but vital power held in endurance, coil around the stone walls and hang like a mist. The sound lingers, almost tangible, mingling with the faint smoke of the hearth and the subtle aroma of herbs tucked into tiny pouches along the sill. Each scent, each sound, is a tether, an invisible thread connecting her to generations long past, and yet it is also a shield against the emptiness that waits beyond these walls. The castle itself breathes around her, stone walls alive with history. The chill of dawn seeps through every crack, curling around her ankles and sending shivers up her spine. Shadows stretch and twist across the floor, following her every movement, long fingers brushing against her legs like reminders of unseen watchers. Outside, the crows wheel in the pale morning sky, their cries sharp, insistent, almost mocking. She watches them with a strange mixture of longing and caution. Beyond these walls, a world waits, a world of sharp edges and cold winds, but is not yet hers to touch. And still, in her eyes, there's a quiet fire, a patient reckoning that her strength, like the frost on the window, can endure even the harshest cold. Every task she undertakes is both survival and defiance. Scrubbing the hearth is no mere cleaning. It is a ritual, a testament to warmth and life against the encroaching chill. Chopping vegetables, folding linen, stacking firewood. Each motion carries meaning beyond its function. It is a declaration. She exists, she is present, and her labor matters, even if it is unseen, even if it is unnoticed. In a drawer, a rusted key catches a stray beam of sunlight, glinting faintly, a silent promise of doors that may never open, yet still a symbol of latent possibility. Its presence is a whisper, a reminder that the castle holds secrets as patient and enduring as the stones themselves. Her gaze drifts to the small crucifix hanging crookedly above the doorway. The wood is worn, the edges smoothed by generations of hands. She traces it lightly with her fingers, feeling the grooves and dents, the history pressed into its surface. She feels the weight of tradition pressing against her, heavy and almost suffocating. Yet beneath it, there is vitality, a pulse of life hidden in corners and shadows, the quiet insistence of a human spirit. The crucifix is more than an object. It is a mirror, reflecting the endurance and courage of those who lived before her. She senses their presence, their silent encouragement, and in their memory, she finds her own strength. The wind shifts outside, carrying with it the sense of frozen earth, distant fires, and damp wood. Smoke curls from chimneys, twisting in unpredictable patterns, and a crow lands on the battlements, black eyes observing the world below. Its claws scrape against stone, sharp and deliberate. The girl watches, imagining the freedom of flight, the ability to rise above the stone walls and witness the world from a vantage no one else could claim. And yet, even as desire and longing clawed her chest, she knows the power of constraint. Within these walls, she learns patience, vigilance, and the quiet strategy required to survive. Every chant, every fold of linen, every repetition of a mundane task becomes a stitch in the fabric of her endurance, a silent defiance against a world that would prefer she remain invisible. The room resonates with echoes of countless lives. The wooden floor creaks beneath her knees, the sound echoing like a slow, measured heartbeat. The scent of damp stone and burning rushes wraps around her, mingling with herbs and the faint metallic tang of cold water. She pauses to listen, truly listen, to the symphony of her environment. The drip of condensation from the window, the sigh of wind through the walls, the distant murmur of servants beginning their day. Each sound is a note in a melody she alone can perceive, a song reminding her that she exists, that she matters, even in obscurity. Her hands, raw and trembling, rise from the basin, water dripping in small arcs onto the stones beneath her. She presses a cloth to her cheek, inhaling the sharp, clean scent, and allows herself a fleeting vision of her mother's hands, long gone, guiding her in the same motions. A faint smile touches her lips, and she whispers the final line of the chant, letting it dissolve into the silence that fills the room. The silence is thick, almost tactile, carrying the weight of mourning and the faint promise of unseen possibilities. Beyond the walls, the crows scatter, wings slicing the pale sky, voices carried off by the wind. The girl rises, straightening against the pressure of the day, feeling both anticipation and weariness settle into her bones. Her gaze lingers on the crucifix, the glint of the rusted key, the textures of a room that has defined her world, shaped her survival, and honed her endurance. And in that stillness, she senses a stir, a quiet pulse hinting at choices not yet made, paths not yet walked, and challenges yet to come. The castle, with all its stone and shadow, is no longer merely a prison. It is a crucible, forging resilience in the cold, relentless rhythm of daily existence. The morning wind rattles the window pane, lifting a single feather that drifts to the hearth. She bends to lift it, tracing its delicate curve with careful fingers. In its fragile form, she sees possibility, the thin line between duty and desire, constraint and freedom. The chant she murmured earlier lingers, an invisible thread connecting past, present, and future, binding her to the lineage of women and men who shaped these walls without recognition. And in that moment, she allows herself a vision, brief but insistent, of a life beyond these stone corridors, where the smallest acts of courage can leave a mark upon history. The castle slowly awakens, sunlight spilling across battlements and moats, stretching shadows long and wavering. The girl glances toward distant gates and untraveled corridors, feeling a twinge of fear mingled with anticipation. Within these walls, she is small and silent, yet she senses the growing strength within her, an emerging force tempered by repetition, observation, and careful patience. The stories of those who came before whisper to her in every crack and crevice, tales of labor, endurance, secrecy, and subtle triumph. And she, kneeling before a basin, in a room heavy with frost, smoke, and quiet courage, is now part of that living memory. Her hands brush against the rough wood of the crucifix one final time before she steps back. The rusted key, still hidden in the drawer, seems to pulse with possibility, waiting for a hand brave enough to claim it. Outside, the crows wheel again, their cries sharp, timeless, echoing against stone walls. And within her chest, a rhythm pulses, a mirror of the ancient heartbeat that has sustained generations in silence and obscurity. She takes a deep breath, letting the cold air fill her lungs, and allows herself to imagine a world where even the smallest hand, even a hand red and raw from toil, can shape destiny. She moves to gather the finished laundry, her movements fluid, precise, almost reverent. Each folded cloth, each carefully placed garment, is a testament to patience, to attention, to the power of small, deliberate acts in a world that too often overlooks the quiet ones. The wind shifts again, sending a chill across her shoulders, but it also carries with it a faint scent of possibility, a hint of life beyond stone and shadow. She pauses, sensing the rhythm of the castle, the pulse of its ancient stones beneath her feet, the echo of footsteps long gone. And in that pause, she understands, survival is not merely endurance, but an art, a weaving of small victories into the fabric of time. As she straightens, the feather she had found earlier flutters from her hand, carried by the wind, settling on a windowsill like a fragile talisman. She glances at it, at the crucifix, at the rusted key, and feels the weight of what is past pressing against her chest, but also the faint, unyielding call of what is yet to come. The room is still, bathed in morning light, yet alive with the echoes of those who came before, and with the quiet, growing heartbeat of a girl who has learned that strength is often invisible, and victory often silent. The crows cry once more, sharp and insistent, as if heralding the path ahead. And in that cry, in the cold air and the frost etching its delicate patterns across the glass, in the small rituals and the heavy silence, the girl finds a quiet determination. The castle is no longer simply her confinement. It is the forge of her becoming. Every shadow, every chill, every unnoticed act of labor strengthens her, prepares her. And as she gathers herself to step beyond the basin, the world, harsh, demanding, untamed, waits for her, and she is ready, even if it does not yet know it. The smoke of a dying hearth curls upward in the narrow room, twisting like a restless spirit toward the cracked ceiling. It carries with it the sense of burning oak, charred bread, and the faint iron tang of ash that settles stubbornly into the stones. Shadows sway and lean across the walls, stretching long and thin as if the fire itself is breathing its last, mourning its own extinguishment. In the corner, a widow sits by the window, her hands clasped tightly over her knees, knuckles white and trembling. She gazes down at the courtyard, where servants move like whispers among the frost-slicked stones, their steps muted yet measured, deliberate in a world that refuses pause. Each scrape of a boot, each low murmur, is magnified in her silence, a rhythm she has learned to listen to with both fear and longing. Her gown, once bright and joyous, is now dulled with grief, the rich hues washed to a somber gray by tears and neglect. It rustles softly as she shifts, the faint sound merging with the occasional drip of condensation from the stone ceiling. Every corner of the room holds a memory, sharp and unyielding. The shadowed alcove where her children once played, their laughter a bright, fleeting echo now lost in the corridors of memory. The hearth itself, where warmth and the scent of stews once mingled with song and conversation, now a graveyard of ash and fading embers. Her eyes, rimmed with a quiet fatigue, carry the weight of nights spent counting each heartbeat against the echoing emptiness, nights where the silence pressed close, unyielding and accusing. On the table beside her lies a small, battered prayer book, its leather cracked and worn, pages annotated with trembling ink. Each scrawl, each carefully penned line, is a plea for comfort, for unseen justice, for mercy that never came. She opens it, and her fingertips trace the words, whispering them under her breath as though the syllables themselves could conjure the past into this cold present. The words, fragile yet determined, outlast the fleeting strength of human resolve, reminding her that even in absence, some kind of faith endures. She reads slowly, letting each sentence sink into her bones, a balm against the relentless pressure of memory. Outside, life continues with a brutal impartiality. The blacksmith's hammer falls again and again on heated iron, each strike ringing through the courtyard like a bell tolling for the dead. Time moves forward, heedless of grief, ignoring the fractures of human hearts and the empty spaces left behind by laughter and warmth. Yet even in this indifference, she finds a rhythm, a measure she can hold on to, a subtle proof that the world persists, that life continues whether she wills it or not. She rises slowly, joints stiff from countless nights of vigil, and moves toward the casement. The cold air rushes in, sharp and unyielding, lifting stray wisps of hair that brush against her temple. Her eyes track a raven alighting on the roof, feathers as black as midnight, eyes glinting with a strange, uncanny intelligence. It perches there like a silent witness to her solitude, a dark emblem of both foreboding and endurance. Every object in the room holds weight. The cracked bowl on the table tells of meals made from the bare scraps, a testament to endurance. The threadbare blanket draped over a chair speaks of nights shivering beneath thin cloth, the quiet suffering of bodies surviving. The iron latch on the door, cold and unyielding, is both barrier and protection, a fragile defense against chaos and intrusion. Each item is a testament to life continued stubbornly in the face of absence. She inhales deeply, letting the mixture of smoke, cold air, and faint herbs fill her lungs. Memory and loss intertwine in her chest, heavy yet intimate, pressing against her ribs, yet from that weight, a fragile hope begins to rise. She remembers the laughter first, how it once spilled freely through the halls. Her children's voices, insistent, bright, filling the spaces with joy, are now ghosts. Memory torments and comforts simultaneously. She traces the edges of the prayer book, touching smudged ink as if she could smooth the past into something tangible. A candle trembles nearby, its flame flickering like a heartbeat in sympathy with hers. Shadows leap across the walls, forming shapes she half recognizes, specters of the departed, echoes of her imagination, companions in a room where she is both alone and surrounded. In these fleeting forms, she finds presence amid absence. A sudden creak rises from the stairwell. She starts, heart tightening, listening. Footsteps, uncertain, light, belong to no one familiar. Yet the sound is not frightening. It is a reminder that the world continues beyond her grief. Life goes on in footsteps, in the scraping of metal on stone, in the whisper of fabric against wood. She closes her eyes and envisions the courtyard as it once was. Children chasing one another through morning mist, servants calling to one another, voices lifting in laughter and exasperation, the scent of bread baking in the communal oven. Then she opens her eyes and sees the courtyard as it is now. Orderly, muted, a stage for survival played out in quiet, unremarkable gestures. Her hands, thin and veined, reach for a small cup of water. She drinks slowly, deliberately, tasting not only the cool liquid, but the solidity of the present, the stubborn pulse of life that resists despair. Every breath, every sip, every blink becomes an act of defiance against the void encroaching upon her. She bends to sweep a few crumbs from the table, a gesture so mundane it might seem inconsequential. Yet in these domestic rhythms lies meaning. Ritual, proof that existence, however fragile, endures. Returning to the window, she watches the raven lift into the gray sky, silent and absolute in its flight. Its wings beat against the wind, a promise that even in darkness, there is movement, there is passage, there is continuation. She breathes in the sharp air, feeling it sweep in her chest where grief lingers, carrying away the stagnant weight of loss. Her eyes follow the bird as it arcs over the courtyard, imagining it bearing messages she cannot voice, prayers too delicate for her lips. In its shadow across the stones, she sees the possibility of transformation, from loss to memory, from mourning to reflection, from silence to the quiet whisper of resilience. The room itself is alive with stories. Walls darkened with smoke stains are witnesses to suffering and endurance alike. The hearth, skeletal and cold, will one day be reborn in flame, casting light upon the old stones, reigniting past warmth. Her fingers brush the iron latch once more, a quiet affirmation of vigilance, a pledge to meet each day with steady courage, to navigate sorrow with measured grace. She kneels briefly, hands resting upon the prayer book, whispering words meant only for walls, smoke, and memory itself. Each line is a seed, a hope planted in soil darkened by loss, waiting to grow in silence. She recalls small moments once taken for granted, the scent of lavender drying in the window, the sound of the miller's wheel turning lazily in the distance, the way the dawn light slants across the courtyard stones, turning them to gold before the sun climbs higher. Each memory is a lifeline, a thread connecting her present sorrow to a past vibrancy, a reminder that joy, though fleeting, is never fully extinguished. In these reflections, she allows herself to smile, a tremor of recognition that life persists not only in grand gestures, but in the humblest acts, sweeping floors, folding linen, lighting a candle, preparing a meal from the meager stores at hand. The widow rises once more, stretching stiff shoulders, feeling the ache of time etched into her bones. She moves deliberately through the room, touching objects with reverence, acknowledging survival in every stone, every piece of furniture, every scar upon the walls. She breathes slow and deep, feeling the pulse of life in her chest, the quiet insistence that she Two, is part of the world's ongoing rhythm. Outside, the courtyard awaits, the hammer strikes of the blacksmith continuing, the wind whispering across empty fields, distant voices carried faintly on the air. Somewhere, laughter waits, somewhere, unseen, hope waits. And as the raven disappears into the horizon, she watches, understanding that endurance is not a shout but a quiet assertion, a small, steadfast refusal to surrender to despair. She too will endure. She will witness days etched in ash and shadow, nights filled with memory and prayer, and in the silent gestures of survival, she will find meaning. Each breath, each step, each whispered word is a testament to the persistence of the human spirit, a fragile hope anchoring her to life itself. The widow closes the casement slowly, allowing the cold air to linger in the corners of the room, a reminder of the world outside and the life that continues beyond her walls. She sinks to her knees by the hearth, hands resting upon the empty stones where fire once danced, and whispers a final line of prayer, a pledge not just to the memory of those lost, but to the living world she still inhabits. And in that quiet act, in the gentle bend of her body, in the faint rustle of her gown, a fragile hope rises again, a seed of resilience, waiting patiently, silently, to bloom in the chapters yet to come. Through the narrow slit of the castle turret, morning light spilled in like liquid silver, falling across stone steps slick with frost. Each ray caught the edges of the worn flagstones, highlighting the irregularities worn smooth by countless feet over countless years. The light trembled as it met the rough surface, shimmering across cracks and grooves as though the stones themselves were breathing, remembering the weight of history that had pressed upon them. A young noblewoman moved downward with deliberate care, her slippers whispering against the cold, unyielding stone, leaving fleeting impressions that would vanish with the first stirrings of the household. In her basket, eggs nestled beside sprigs of thyme and rosemary, the green leaves still trembling with dew from the hidden gardens tucked behind the high walls. These gardens, secret worlds of earth and water, offered a quiet rebellion against the rigid architecture of her life, a patch of untamed life carefully held in her hands. The wind that stole in through the narrow slit carried more than the scent of pine and damp soil. It brought the distant aroma of bread baking in the kitchens below, a warmth that seemed almost sacred amidst the cold austerity of the castle. She paused, hands hovering over the coiled braid at the nape of her neck, fingers trembling slightly, not with fear, but with the heavy awareness of expectation pressing upon her like the stone above. The castle itself was alive with invisible chains, with the soft whisper of silk skirts against stone, the echo of measured footsteps, the low hum of servants and guards marking the rhythm of her world. Yet in the ritual of tending, plucking herbs, arranging eggs, embroidering quiet patterns, she discovered a form of poetry, a subtle, resilient defiance that she could claim in each deliberate movement. A bell tolled from the chapel tower, its deep resonance spilling into every corridor and stairwell, sinking into the bones of the stone like a heartbeat that would not cease. It marked time, relentless, impartial, indifferent to desire or hesitation. She lingered for a heartbeat at the carved wooden door that led deeper into the keep, fingertips brushing the grooves, tracing the life embedded within the grain. Stories whispered here. Women who had walked these halls before her, bending under invisible burdens, leaving traces of courage, secret prayers, and whispered resistance that only the walls remembered. Her gaze swept the hall beyond the door, catching the faint glimmer of torchlight reflected off iron grates, each flicker animating the stones themselves, casting shadows that danced like half-forgotten memories. She inhaled, the cold air sharp in her lungs, tasting the mingling scents of damp earth, resin, and distant hearth fire. Anticipation lingered in the morning air, a fragile tension that made every step feel magnified, every breath an act of negotiation between presence and obligation. She descended into the corridor below, where the castle seemed to awaken around her. A sigh of wind drifted through arrow slits, carrying the faint clatter of hurried footsteps and the low murmur of voices from kitchens and courtyards. Every sound was a note in a larger composition, a score written in stone, metal, and wood, and she moved as both participant and observer, a single thread woven into the tapestry of castle life. By a frost-laced window, she paused again, pressing her hand to the cold glass. Beyond, the forest stretched in muted tones of gray and green. The tips of pines bowed beneath frost and snow. She imagined stepping beyond the walls, letting the wind carry her through the dense, shadowed woods, yet she remained tethered. Even in confinement, the castle offered its own form of freedom, a life negotiated through minute rebellions, subtle assertions, and the careful claiming of time and space. The basket shifted slightly in her grasp, reminding her of the weight she bore, not merely of eggs and herbs, but of expectations, lineage, and the fragile balance of her household. Each egg, a perfect, unbroken globe, mirrored her own precarious existence, delicate, vulnerable, yet capable of nurturing life. She imagined hands like hers, tending eggs, herbs, and meals for centuries. Mothers, daughters, sisters whose lives have been dictated by inheritance, alliances, and fear. The castle did not merely shelter her. It contained the echoes of every choice, every secret, every sacrifice ever made within these walls. Light lengthened, stretching shadows across the corridors, pooling in corners and doorways. She moved like a wisp of smoke, present yet barely noticed, her movements measured but infused with intent. Each step was a negotiation with gravity, etiquette, and her own heartbeat, punctuated by small fears and quiet hopes. A sudden draft carried the mingled scents of earth and resin, grounding her in a moment of clarity. Life found its way, bending light and shaping air, threading through stone like a persistent melody. She entered a chamber where sunlight softened over a stretched embroidery frame. Her fingers traced the delicate stitches, worn smooth by devotion, persistence, and secret defiance. Each stitch was a wordless testament to patience and courage, to a life negotiated between confinement and self-expression. She felt the continuity of generations, the women who had worked this same cloth, who had left their mark not in grand gestures, but in subtle, enduring acts. The embroidery was a bridge across centuries, a silent affirmation that the small and the hidden mattered. The bell tolled again, echoing through the stone halls, vibrating in her chest as a reminder that time moved ever onward. But so too did life, quietly, insistently, resiliently. She replaced the frame, adjusted the basket, and took a deliberate step toward the next corridor. A faint smile brushed her lips, tempered by the cold underfoot. She felt both imprisoned and free, a paradox contained within the stone walls, in the stairs, in the interplay of light and shadow. Ascending another narrow stair toward the inner keep, the wind whispered against the slit windows, carrying voices from the forest beyond. She paused to listen, a bird's faint call, the rustle of branches, the subtle hum of distant life beyond the stone. For a fleeting moment, she imagined abandoning the walls, letting the wind guide her, allowing the forest to reclaim her senses. But the basket's weight, the quiet responsibilities that lingered like invisible chains, drew her back. She was tethered, yet in these very tetherings she discovered fragile beauty, the poetry of small rebellions, the luminous quiet of courage, the light that shone in restraint. At the top of the stair, sunlight struck her face through a narrow window slit, painting her in light and shadow. The stones around her seemed to hold their breath, still and eternal. She paused, letting her eyes sweep the horizon beyond the walls, imagining the expanse of possibility, even while her feet remained rooted in duty. She inhaled deeply, tasting the mingling scents of pine, frost, and hearth smoke, a reminder that the castle, though confining, was also a sanctuary, a vessel for memory, resilience, and subtle triumphs. She stepped into the great hall, where the air was tinged with warmth from fires long burning, the low murmur of voices, and the clinking of metal tools and utensils. The sounds of domestic life, cooking, cleaning, and secret exchanges, formed a living tapestry, thick with tension, loyalty, and careful negotiation. She moved among it all, a silent observer and participant, her presence marking the rhythm of the day. Every glance she stole, every breath she drew, carried the weight of centuries, the continuity of a life framed by walls, ritual, and fleeting freedoms. The kitchens beckoned, a small world of fire, smoke, and transformation, where raw ingredients became sustenance, where hands moved in choreography refined by generations. She paused near the hearth, inhaling the warmth and savoring the faint tang of smoke on the air. She imagined the hands that had worked here before hers, women who had moved unseen, shaping the lives of others with skill, patience, and quiet determination. Her own small actions, carrying herbs, arranging eggs, tracing embroidery, felt connected to this lineage, a link in the chain of invisible, essential work. Through narrow corridors, she continued, every detail magnified by the morning light, the frost clinging to stone, the damp echo of her slippers, the way shadows pooled against walls and doors, and how the air smelled of pine, resin, and baked bread. Every step was deliberate, a negotiation with history, duty, and self. In the quiet moments, when no one else observed, she allowed herself to breathe fully, to imagine freedom, to feel the pulse of her own existence intertwined with the castle itself. She paused finally by a small window overlooking the outer bailey, the morning sun now spilling fully across the courtyard. Life moved below, servants hurrying to their duties, horses stamping impatiently, the faint murmur of distant voices. She pressed her hands against the cool glass and closed her eyes, letting the sounds and scents anchor her in the continuity of life, in the paradox of confinement and liberation. She felt both the weight of her responsibilities and the subtle light of her own quiet courage. The bell tolled once more, its deep resonance fading into the stillness of the castle. She stepped back, basket in hand, a figure of measured grace, carrying with her the threads of past and present. She descended toward the inner keep, each step deliberate, a testament to her own resilience. Between walls, through narrow corridors and sunlit windows, amidst frost, resin, and distant hearth smoke, she moved in quiet defiance, tethered but luminous, imprisoned yet undeniably free. And as she reached the next chamber, where torchlight flickered and shadows whispered of secrets yet untold, she paused to breathe the air thick with history. The world outside the walls waited in silence, patient, eternal, and full of possibility. Within the stone embrace of her home, she had claimed her moment, her subtle rebellion, her light. And in that delicate balance, she felt the pulse of life itself, steady, unyielding, and luminous, waiting for the next step, the next choice, the next breath of freedom hidden within constraint. The scriptorium breathes in shadows and candlelight. The waxed wick flickers, casting tremulous shapes across the cold stone walls, the murmurs of the past pressing close, as though the room itself remembers centuries of devotion and forgotten hands. A quill scratches against parchment, its voice delicate yet resolute, a fragile heartbeat in the vast cathedral of silence. Each stroke is deliberate, patient, almost defiant. She leans over her work, sleeves rolled to forearms flushed with the effort of devotion, tracing the curling gold leaf that climbs the page like ivy on a forgotten wall. Deep blues and sanguine reds coil in miniature landscapes, each line a whisper from the edge of memory. Her fingers bear the proof of her labor, ink-stained, trembling with the quiet rhythm of centuries that will never know her name. The air is thick with the sharp, earthy scent of ink and aged parchment. Wax from the candle mingles with the faint aroma of melting tallow, a smell both sacred and domestic, grounding her in the reality of her labor. She inhales it, letting it mingle with the echo of the cloister beyond, where monks chant in low, vibrating tones. Their devotion is loud, visible, and ritualized. Hers is quieter, almost invisible, yet no less fierce. Every flourish of the quill, every careful curve of gold, is a heartbeat against the erasure of history, a small rebellion that asserts she exists, even if the world refuses to see her. Winter presses itself against the stones beyond the thick mullioned windows. The wind rakes across the battlements, bending skeletal trees in the garden she will never walk, rattling shutters as if reminding her that the world outside remains indifferent to her work. Snow presses silently against the glass, blanketing the courtyard in ghostly white. The cold gnaws at the soles of her boots, at the tips of her fingers, yet she does not flinch. Her quill moves again, dipping into ink with the precision of ritual, a heartbeat against the void. Each stroke is both prayer and protest, a testament that her life, though hidden, leaves a mark upon the world. The candlelight shivers, throwing her shadow against the walls, making it dance with the angels and saints she illuminates on the page. Her mind drifts to the hands that came before her, monks, women, scribes, pressing ink into parchment, each stroke a defiance against the silence of the ages. Their labor flows into hers, a current of memory she can feel in her own pulse. In this room, she is both student and master, witness and historian, conjuring worlds from nothing more than ink, gold, and devotion. A distant bell tolls, marking an hour in the cloister. She does not pause, letting the sound weave into her work, a metronome for patience and endurance. Her quill dances over the page, drawing spirals, tiny leaves, and the solemn faces of saints. Each figure is infused with a life she can almost hear, a whisper carried in the trembling edges of the gold. Her heart beats in quiet rhythm with the repeated motions of her labor, a secret symphony of persistence and existence. Outside, the wind presses harder against the walls, rattling the windows as if demanding to be noticed. She answers not with words, but with the meticulous insistence of her art. Her fingers smudge ink unconsciously, marking her skin as indelibly as the work marks history. She pauses, rubbing her hands against her sleeves, inhaling the sharp scent of ink mingled with tallow. The cold seeps in, pressing against her chest, as she imagines the snow covering the garden paths, the bones of winter hidden beneath its silent weight. The outside world is vast, unyielding, yet in this small, flame-lit room, she has carved a space of resistance. Every letter she illuminates is a claim of existence, a protest against invisibility, an assertion that women's hands, though unseen, have shaped the contours of history. A shadow passes over the room, and she startles, her breath quickening. A servant's footsteps echo briefly in the corridor, fading into the stone and silence. She leans closer to her manuscript, feeling the pulse of creation beneath her fingers. The saints she paints seem to watch her, eyes aglow with candlelight, their halos trembling like flames in the draught. In their quiet gaze, she finds both comfort and challenge. They demand devotion, yes, but they also demand persistence, a proof that she too, belongs to this continuum of labor and faith. The hours stretch like taffy, bending under the weight of snow and silence. The wind tears at the battlements, rattling shutters with a sudden, violent insistence. She imagines herself outside, walking through the frozen garden, touching each branch, each icy petal, and feeling the world breathe beneath her fingers. But she remains seated, quill in hand, because here, in these four walls, she can preserve eternity. Her work is a fortress, each gilded stroke a battlement, each curve of blue a moat against oblivion. She works not for recognition, but for survival, survival of memory, thought, and the subtle rebellion of being seen. Her mind wanders to the lives outside these walls. The merchants, the soldiers, the villagers, so many names she will never know. She wonders what they would think if they could witness the meticulous devotion of her labor, the quiet insistence that something as small as a stroke of ink can ripple across centuries. And yet, she knows that the act itself is sacred. It is not for the world to honor, but for time to remember. Her manuscript is a prayer and a testament, a promise written in gold and indigo that history, even when silent, can be bent toward persistence. The candle flickers violently, throwing the room into near darkness. Her shadow stretches, dances, and then collapses back into itself. She pauses to breathe, the cold pressing at her spine, the ache of her arms a reminder of the human body's fragility. And still, she continues. Ink flows, gold gleams, and the blues of her pigments whisper against the whiteness of the page. Outside, the wind roars like an indifferent god, and she listens not with fear, but with a fierce awareness that her small acts, quiet, repetitive, invisible, are acts of defiance. The quill moves with increasing rhythm now, as if time itself bends to witness her devotion. Her eyes ache from the candlelight, yet she sees beyond the present moment into centuries yet to come. She imagines a reader, far in the future, lifting her manuscript with trembling hands, marveling at the intricate details, feeling the pulse of life preserved in ink. Perhaps they will know nothing of her face, her voice, or her breath. Yet her existence will echo in the lines, in the shimmer of gold, in the delicate shading of blue and red. Snow presses harder against the windows, settling thickly on the battlements, muffling the distant clamor of the outer world. Inside, the scriptorium is a sanctuary. Every stroke is both a prayer and a rebellion, a quiet defiance of a world that prefers to forget. She leans back, rubbing ink from her fingers, feeling the tactile proof of persistence, of resistance. This labor is her life, and within it, she claims eternity, her hand shaping the contours of a history that will outlast the cold stone walls, the chanting monks, the indifferent winter beyond. She pauses, listening to the faint rustle of parchment, the whisper of quill against page, the soft breath of the room settling into itself. Candlelight trembles one final time before steadying, casting a gentle glow upon her manuscript. Her eyes soften with exhaustion, but within them burns a quiet resolve. Every line she has traced, every shimmer of gold, is a heartbeat against the void, an assertion that she exists. And even as darkness gathers in the corners of the room, even as winter howls beyond the walls, her quiet triumph endures. A final gust rattles the shutters, and she leans back fully, allowing herself a moment of reflection. The saints in her illuminations seem to smile faintly, the halos catching the light as if acknowledging her presence. She imagines the centuries folding over this room, the snow covering the battlements, the distant echoes of chants rising and falling. And she knows that in this suspended, fragile moment, something eternal has been created, not for fame, not for reward, but for the quiet insistence that even hidden, even unseen, her hands have shaped the world, preserved memory, and claimed her place in the march of time. The candle flickers once, twice, and then steadies, illuminating the manuscript in a glow that feels almost sacred. She leans close, tracing one last flourish, feeling the pulse of centuries merge with her own. Ink, gold, and quiet devotion have created a fortress against oblivion. Outside, winter presses on, relentless and indifferent. Inside, in this small room, a heartbeat endures, fragile yet defiant, echoing across the stone, across time, across the unremembered lives she has touched. And as the night stretches long and deep, she closes her eyes for a fleeting moment, letting the ache of her hidden life fill the room with unspoken resonance, a quiet anthem to perseverance, to devotion, to the invisible hands that shape the world. The courtyard awakens slowly, as if each cobbled stone exhales a breath it has held through the long night. Mist curls and drifts between the walls, a pale veil that blurs the rigid lines of stone, transforming the familiar shapes of the manor into specters of memory. Every footstep will leave a trace, but for now, the world is hushed, caught between darkness and dawn, waiting for life to stir. In the chill, a laundress bends over a frozen trough, her hands plunged into steaming water that hisses against the cold. The clash of temperature sends tiny clouds of vapor rising, twisting in the thin shafts of light that pierce the courtyard. Her fingers, raw and chapped, press and rub the coarse wool, each motion deliberate, each gesture a rhythm carried across generations. Frost clings stubbornly to the shawl draped over her shoulders, stiff and unyielding, yet she moves with grace born of necessity, muscles remembering decades of repetition. The scent of wet earth mingles with smoke from nearby hearths, curling like invisible serpents around the low, squat walls. The acrid tang of ash soap, made from charred remains of the fire and the rendered fat of livestock, stings her nostrils, sharp and honest. It is a smell of survival, of labor endured and accepted. Around her, the courtyard hums softly with life that has not yet spoken. A rope swings gently from a beam above, silent but insistent. A line between constraint and freedom, a taut reminder of the limits imposed by stone and tradition. It sways, whispering in the cold air, as if carrying messages from hands long gone, from women whose names have been lost, but whose presence lingers in sweat-stained sleeves and calloused palms. From a high window, a lady of the manor observes. Her fingers trace the delicate lace of her veil, drawing patterns unseen by the courtyard below. Her gaze is distant yet vigilant, as though she measures the invisible currents of power and expectation that govern these walls. She sees the laundress, sees the rhythm of her labor, and in that watching there is understanding and judgment, tenderness and indifference intertwined. The courtyard, though open to the sky, is bound by hierarchy, by the weight of centuries, and each stone seems to remember who may tread upon it and who must bow. The laundress hums a low tune, the notes as soft as mist, threading through the empty spaces. It is a melody that carries history, a whisper of mothers and grandmothers, of children lulled to sleep beside the warmth of dying fires, of prayers stitched into the hems of garments. It is a song of endurance, of quiet fortitude, sung without need for acknowledgement. And yet, even as she bends and scrubs, her mind drifts beyond the walls. She lifts her gaze toward the pale morning sky, noticing the first glint of sun on icy puddles. The light touches her face, warm and fleeting, as though granting a brief reprieve from the constant rigor of daily life. For a moment, she is not just a hand to the trough, not merely a servant defined by routine. She is a living testament to resilience, an individual whose existence matters in ways that no rank or title can diminish. The courtyard is more than stones and frost. It is a stage where life is performed in small, essential acts. A crow alights on a distant parapet, shaking its wings and sending a sprinkle of snowflakes to the ground. Its call cuts through the quiet, sharp and commanding, as though reminding all who dwell here that the world beyond these walls waits with dangers and possibilities alike. Somewhere in the shadows, a child watches from behind a post, eyes wide and curious, fingers gripping the wood. The laundress catches the movement from the corner of her eye, smiles faintly, and hums the tune louder. The song becomes a bridge, a tether between generations, a lesson in observation and survival whispered without words. As the morning grows, so too does the pulse of the courtyard. Smoke curls higher from the kitchens, the smell of burning bread and roasting meat mingling with the damp frost. The lady at the window descends now, silk brushing stone, the soft patter of her feet lost in the larger rhythm of awakening. She pauses beside the trough, her hands clasped, her breath catching in the sudden intimacy of the scene. They do not speak, needless, for the understanding is silent but complete. The laundress feels the gaze, the weight of acknowledgement that is both light and heavy. It is a rare recognition of shared humanity across divides of class and duty, and it lingers longer than any word could. The rope swings still, catching the light as if attempting to mark time itself. It is a symbol, though neither may speak its meaning aloud. To some, it is a tool, an instrument of work or punishment. To others, it is a toy, a simple distraction. Yet beneath its mundane surface lies a metaphor for endurance, for the constraints life imposes, and the subtle freedom found in accepting and enduring them. The laundress straightens, water dripping from wool onto frozen stone, and the song leaves her lips in a faint sigh. She is aware of her own strength, measured not in conquest, but in survival, in the quiet assertion of presence where the world expects acquiescence. Every movement, every breath, becomes amplified in the stillness. The courtyard itself seems to lean closer, listening, remembering, absorbing the life that passes across its uneven stones. She turns now, glancing toward the far gate where shadows pool like ink. Beyond lies the unknown, vast and unclaimed, a realm that promises both peril and possibility. The sun rises higher, its light stretching long fingers across the frost, gilding the edges of stone and shadow alike. It illuminates the texture of history, the scars and etchings in each surface, the lives layered invisibly atop one another, creating a tapestry that is both beautiful and merciless. A wind stirs, carrying the scent of distant fields and forests, sharp with pine and smoke and the raw tang of cold earth. It lifts the shawl around her shoulders for an instant, revealing the curve of her spine, the strength etched in muscle and sinew, the quiet pride of a life lived fully in spite of limitations. She closes her eyes, letting the wind speak to her, letting it whisper of worlds beyond these walls, of choices made, of survival achieved. Her hum fades into the rhythm of the morning. The clatter of stone underfoot, the drip of thawing ice, the soft cries of birds welcoming day. In the corner of the courtyard, a barrel of water trembles as frost releases its grip, tiny shards falling into the basin with a crystalline chime. The sound is simple, yet it holds weight, a reminder that even the smallest motions can echo through the space, that life insists upon being noticed, even by those too weary to lift their eyes. A pair of men emerge from the stables, their breath pluming in the air, hooves clattering against stone as they prepare the horses for labor and journey. One murmurs a quiet prayer, lips moving with reverence, the syllables lost to the morning wind, but not to the walls that have heard centuries of devotion. The laundress pauses, recognizing the act as kin to her own, devotion through routine, through the repeated offerings of body and will. The lady of the manor moves again, walking along the edges of the courtyard, hands brushing the cold stone. She notices the subtle hierarchy of frost patterns, the way some stones gleam while others are dulled with wear, as though the courtyard itself mirrors the social order. Harsh where attention is paid, worn where it is neglected. She imagines the lives of those who tread upon these stones daily, their dreams, their fears, the quiet rebellions they enact in small, unnoticed ways. She wonders if they too sense the weight of the walls, the stories trapped in each shadow, each crack, each tiny ridge beneath a boot. The laundress returns to her work, dipping wool into the steaming water, her hands aching, joints stiff, yet her movements retain a certain fluidity, as if memory has become muscle. The mist swirls around her, clinging to hair and shawl, creating the illusion of a halo. And for an instant, she feels herself lifted beyond the courtyard, beyond expectation, beyond duty. In that moment, she is both anchored and unbound, a paradox of flesh and spirit. Birdsong rises as the sun climbs further, threading through the mist with gold and warmth. A cat slinks silently across the courtyard, paws careful against the slippery stones, tail flicking like a metronome to unseen music. Its presence is both a curiosity and a comfort, a reminder that life persists in its own quiet ways. The laundress glances down, and their eyes meet. For a heartbeat, she senses kinship in the alertness, in the resilience of a creature surviving in the same harsh, ordered world. And yet, the rope swings still, its simple arc reflecting sunlight, tracing shadows that move slowly across the courtyard. It is a metronome of time, of labor, of endurance, marking the rhythm of countless mornings, the invisible choreography of a place held together by routine, by care, by human persistence. She lifts her gaze to the distant hills, the frost-laden trees, the faint line of smoke from a neighbor's chimney. Somewhere, the world is wider, wilder, freer, and yet here, she has carved space for herself, subtle but unyielding. She straightens fully, water dripping from her arms, the chill biting at exposed skin, and feels the pulse of her own life echo in the courtyard. The stones, the mist, the frost, the smoke, they are witnesses to the quiet courage of existence. Every droplet falling from wool to stone is a testament. Every breath drawn into lungs aching from cold is an assertion of being. She hums once more, softer now, a thread connecting past and present, labor and hope, constraint and freedom. The courtyard exhales, releasing its mist, and in that fading fog, shadows lengthen, carrying the memory of morning into the day ahead. And though work continues, though hierarchy endures, though frost still bites and rope swings quietly, the early morning has left its mark, a narrative of resilience, of presence, of the quiet assertion that life can persist in its own dignity, even in the shadow of expectation. In the silence that follows, there's the faint echo of song, a thread unbroken, a testament to the invisible power of enduring. The laundress lifts her gaze one final time toward the vast sky beyond the walls, feeling the pull of the world outside, a gentle reminder that even within boundaries imposed by stone and expectation, the spirit stretches beyond, seeking, enduring, imagining. The sun now, full above the parapets, warms the courtyard, casting long, golden reflections across stone and ice, rope and shadow, song and silence. Life has awakened fully here, and yet the memory of the first light, the hush, the mist, the song, lingers, a promise carried forward into the unfolding day. The courtyard, once a frozen vessel of labor, now hums with life, each action a note in a symphony of existence. The laundress, though weary, moves with quiet grace, aware of her own indomitable presence, a witness to history and a keeper of memory, her song mingling with smoke, frost, and light. In this intersection of labor, hierarchy, and simple courage, the essence of survival is revealed, not in grand gestures, but in enduring fully, breathing fully, being fully, in the quiet spaces between expectation and self, stone and sky, mist and sun. A wooden shutter rattled softly against the stone frame, stirred by the first breath of evening. Its tremor was a hesitant voice, half whisper, half plea, announcing the coming darkness, the unseen hours that would creep like smoke through every hall and corridor. She moved along the narrow passage, her feet light, yet purposeful against the uneven flagstones, each step a rhythm in the quiet symphony of domestic life. Her hair, bound in a modest kerchief, framed a face marked by endurance, the careful etchings of years that bore witness to labor, care, and whispered prayers. In her arms, a bundle of herbs rested: thyme, rosemary, sage, lavender, plucked at the cusp of dusk, their fragrance a muted counterpoint to the lingering smoke from the hearth, curling upward in pale spirals that kissed the low-beamed ceiling before dissolving into the shadows. The air was heavy with the sense of work and home, of meals cooked slowly over flames, of wood smoldering into embers, of herbs dried and still warm from the evening sun. It was a chorus of sensory notes, each layer telling its own story, of survival, of patience, of moments held as sacred even when unnoticed. She paused at the doorway of a small chamber where children slept beneath blankets thick with warmth and the scent of wool and smoke. Their chests rose and fell in unison, a quiet rhythm untainted by the burdens she carried, their dreams untouched by hunger, worry, or fear. Shadows pooled in corners and stretched across walls, bending with the flicker of firelight. She lingered, her gaze drawn to the peaceful rise and fall of their breaths, to the small, perfect details, the curl of a sleeping fist, the flutter of eyelashes against a pale cheek, the subtle weight of innocence, delicate and imperiled. Her eyes found a cracked mirror hanging crookedly on the wall. For a fleeting moment, she saw both herself and the lineage of women stitched into every line of her face. There was the stubborn curve of a jaw inherited from a grandmother who had walked barefoot through frozen fields, the quiet intensity of gaze handed down through generations, the hands, weathered and precise, capable of both creation and defense. In that reflection, time folded inward. The faces of women long gone flickered behind hers, like spirits caught in glass, guiding her, reminding her of the persistence of life even when unrecorded by chronicles or song. Every scar, every crease, every worn knuckle spoke of courage performed in silence, resilience shaped by necessity, love offered without expectation. The bell tolled in the distant village, its sound a resonant heartbeat across the valley. Deep and sonorous, it carved the landscape into moments, each echo a reminder that time would not pause, that nights and days moved in ceaseless procession, indifferent to the lives unfolding beneath them. The tolling was beautiful and inevitable, a lament and a promise, carrying with it the weight of memory and the whisper of futures yet to arrive. She knelt, arranging the herbs in a woven basket, pressing them lightly, the motion delicate, almost sacred. Each fold of cloth, each tied bundle, each brush of her fingers against the basket's rim was a silent hymn, a testament to devotion, to defiance, to enduring love performed in gestures small but profound. The corridor smelled of smoke and herbs, of damp stone, of twilight pressing gently against the walls. She traced the contours of her surroundings, the rough-hewn beams, the uneven flagstones worn smooth by countless feet, the dented doorframe that bore witness to generations of hands. Every mark told a story, a quiet narrative of life persevering in its ordinary ways. And in the hush of the chamber, these stories seemed almost tangible, pressing softly against her skin like the weight of memory itself. She rose, moving toward the hearth to lay down the basket, the herbs exhaling their faint, calming fragrance into the warm, smoky air. Sparks rose briefly from the dying embers, dancing like tiny, golden ghosts before disappearing. She brushed one from her kerchief and let her fingers linger for a heartbeat on the stone, feeling the residual heat. Even these simple motions were ritualized, tending the fire, arranging the herbs, safeguarding the sleeping children, all small acts of creation and preservation, all imbued with the sacred rhythm of ordinary life. Her gaze wandered again to the children, and she knelt, smoothing their blankets with a gentleness born of centuries of inherited care. Their faces were serene, untouched by the fear and fatigue that clung to the shadows of the house. Each exhale of theirs was a vow renewed, each tiny, unconscious movement a reminder that life could still hold moments of fragile, unshakable beauty. Her hands lingered on the soft wool, imprinting warmth, protection, and the unspoken promise that she would hold the world for them while they slept. Outside, the wind rose, moving through the shutters with more insistence, bending the trees and whispering across the valley. It carried scents of distant fields, of the river threading silver through dark hills, of frost beginning to claim the edges of the earth. She paused, letting the wind's voice seep into her chest, a reminder of forces beyond her control, of life's inexorable rhythm. In the wind's sigh, she felt both a threat and a benediction, the possibility of change, of endings, of beginnings. The basket in her hands felt heavier now, not from the weight of herbs, but from the invisible burden she bore, the responsibility to preserve, to nurture, to endure. She thought of the children's futures, the world outside these walls, the dangers of war, hunger, sickness, and the cruelty of time itself. Each act she performed, each bundle tied, each blanket tucked, was an assertion against entropy, a quiet rebellion against a world that would not pause for care, for love, for life lived in silent dignity. The lineage of women whose echoes she carried within her hands, within her breath, seemed to hum quietly beneath her skin, reminding her that even unseen deeds mattered, that courage often wore the guise of quiet devotion. She straightened and stepped to the doorway once more. The shutter rattled violently in the gust, and she let the wind brush her face, carrying with it the mingled fragrances of earth, frost, and wood smoke. She closed her eyes briefly, listening to the distant calls of night birds, to the sigh of the river, to the subtle murmur of a village settling into darkness. And in that listening, she felt the fragile, luminous thread that connected her labor to life itself, to survival, to hope, to the slow, quiet turning of the world. Returning to the hearth, she examined the arrangement of her herbs one last time, noting the subtle differences in texture, in hue, in scent. Each plant held its own story, its own power, its own fragility. The thyme, small and resilient, reminded her of endurance. The rosemary, fragrant and sharp, spoke of memory. The lavender, pale and soft, whispered of peace and consolation. In their collection, she saw a map of the human heart, persistence, remembrance, and the tender acts of care that defied time and circumstance. She glanced at the cracked mirror again, and the reflection staring back was more than her own. It was a gallery of lives sustained through quiet perseverance, a chorus of women whose courage had been measured not in battlefields or crowns, but in hands that worked, in voices that comforted, in hearts that endured. In that glance, she felt the invisible bonds of history, the resonance of ancestors guiding, whispering, demanding that life continue, that love continue, that survival continue. Her eyes fell finally on the children. Their gentle breaths, the soft weight of their bodies under blankets, the innocence untouched by the burdens of the night. These were her charge, her sacred responsibility. And as she moved toward the doorway, she carried with her not only the basket of herbs, but the invisible load of vigilance, the tender yet unyielding shield of motherhood, of care, of defiance against a world that demanded endurance without reward. The door closed softly behind her, and the room fell into a hush thick with the smell of herbs and smoke, with the warmth of bodies and the cold of approaching night. In that silence, the hidden life of women became tangible, a delicate yet powerful testament to courage, memory, and devotion rendered in small, intimate acts. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters again, insistent, unrelenting, a herald of night's dark promises. Yet inside, the world was preserved, held in a fragile balance, alive with love, vigilance, and the quiet music of survival. The bell's echo faded into the valley, a lingering note that pressed against stone and memory alike. Time moved inexorably onward, carrying with it trials, reckonings, and change. But here, within the walls of the house, life had a slow rhythm, deliberate and sacred. The rustle of herbs, the warmth of blankets, the steady, unassuming courage of a woman moving quietly through shadows. And in this rhythm, there was hope, quiet but persistent, a testament to life lived fully even when unseen, to devotion performed without fanfare, and to the enduring, luminous lineage of women whose ordinary acts became extraordinary through love. Night deepened, stretching across the valley in shades of blue and black. The corridor awaited, patient, knowing that soon the world would demand its due. Yet in the pause before the coming storm, there was the sacred intimacy of labor, of care, of life observed and cherished. In every small gesture, the folding of a cloth, the tying of a bundle, the brush of a hand across a child's cheek, there was a story written, not in chronicles or stone, but in the heartbeat of existence itself. And as she stood, the basket of herbs cradled against her chest, the wind stirring the shutters once more, the narrative of devotion, resilience, and hope extended into the night, invisible yet enduring, ready to carry life forward into the hours yet to come.